Live, Virtual and Constructive Training, or LVC, connects real people operating real systems with real people operating synthetic systems and computer-generated synthetic systems to create a comprehensive training continuum. The F-35 was designed to fight in a full-spectrum contested environment and counter robust anti-access area denial A2AD capabilities of near-peer adversaries. But live training can only accommodate a subset of the F-35 mission sets and combat capabilities, and therefore must have a full LVC training solution. For fourth-generation aircraft and weapon systems, LVC will greatly enhance training and increase combat readiness. But for F-35 pilots to train as they fight, LVC is not an enhancement, it's a requirement. F-35 air combat training requires airspace and range space that mimics the combat environment that the F-35 was built to operate in. LVC will replicate the complex threat environments in which the F-35 was designed to operate. In order to create this LVC training continuum, LVC must integrate dissimilar aircraft with multiple levels of security through connectivity between live players and simulators, while incorporating a learning management system. Unlike fourth-generation platforms, the F-35 operates in decision space afforded by stealth and sensor fusion. In order to adequately hone the required combat skills for each F-35 pilot, each training sortie should be of the highest fidelity in order to declare the entire training system fit for purpose and reduce operational risk. High-fidelity LVC training will allow F-35 pilots to train live to the capabilities of their aircraft and allow F-35 commanders to better ascertain the combat readiness of their squadrons. Furthermore, LVC will support rapid adjustments to F-35 training in order to keep pace with the ever-changing threat environment. F-35 LVC training will benefit from performance-based enhancements. These include the replication of actual combat operating environments, as well as the collection of objective performance metrics to inform the warfighter, maximizing the impact of culminating training events. Performance-based training initiatives will provide enhanced after-action reviews, increased realism, data analytics architecture, and performance trend analyses that address the human dimension to improve combat and mission readiness. Most training airspace and ranges are limited in size, limited in terrain that matches the combat environment, and limited in the number of players. With synthetic injects, these ranges can grow. The environment can change, and a realistic number of players populated, evolving to meet the air combat training requirements of the F-35. F-35 LVC training must balance the correct mix of live and synthetic, both virtual and constructive. Achieving F-35 combat training objectives requires that skills be performed in the simulator, but then have to be accomplished in the aircraft, because with live flying comes the emotional stressors of risk, excitement, and anxiety. No pilot ever climbed into a simulator with the thought that they could die. For F-35 pilots to develop proficiency and confidence in the actual weapon system, and to gain combat readiness in the dynamic environment of the real world, there is no substitute for live flying. Employment of live F-35s will train and task the entire air system support structure to include maintenance, logistics, airfield operations, weapons, security, and life support. Additionally, the collective nature of LVC training will integrate the whole force and reinforce essential connections needed to achieve tactical, operational, and strategic objectives. When fighting against red air bandits beyond visual range using the weapon system sensors, synthetic adversaries will augment air combat training. But once inside visual range, the presence of live bandits is required for F-35 pilots to get eyes on and optimize that training. But there are not enough live players, especially the right type of live players, available to meet the desired numbers for an F-35 air and ground combat training scenario. Even large force exercises with only live players will struggle to meet those numbers, and squadron-level air combat training will suffer an even greater deficiency. Synthetic players are the cost-effective solution used to mitigate this training resource shortage. In a virtual environment, pilots can combat the adversary using the true capabilities of their weapon system. With F-35 full-mission simulators, virtual players will bolster the overall scenario numbers at a fraction of the cost of live F-35s, while providing those pilots unique training advantages. The F-35 has 5 sensors: AESA radar, EOTS, DAS, EW suite, and CNI. The management of those sensors is a key task that every F-35 pilot must master. The F-35 full mission simulators will not only provide pilots with realistic virtual combat training scenarios against enemy air or air defense systems, but these sim pilots can employ their sensors to the full combat capabilities that live F-35s cannot, due to operational security restrictions when operating in an open-air, live environment. Virtual F-35 players will not have the same training rules and safety of flight restrictions that their live F-35 counterparts must adhere to. In a training environment, live players are limited to specific altitude blocks at certain ranges to prevent mid-air collisions. Live players are also required to remain within the boundaries of the training airspace to avoid conflict with civilian air traffic. Virtual players will not have those training handcuffs and can operate with the same rules as in combat, without training restrictions. Not all combat sorties will occur in the daytime, with perfect weather. With simulators, synthetic injects will give those pilots the experience of these different environmental conditions, regardless of what the actual time of day or weather is during the air combat training scenario. The advantage of using virtual players is the ability to connect geographically separated players for one air combat training scenario. The F-35 will deploy for combat with a multi-service, multi-partner force. With virtual players, this required coalition training can occur far more often than today's limited number of LFEs. But even with virtual injects to mitigate the lack of scenario players, there will still not be enough high-end simulators or pilots to fly those simulators to meet the requirements for F-35 training. The F-35 was built to counter complex air and ground threats. The current quantity and quality of live red air and ground threats in inventory does not meet this requirement to train in a highly contested A2AD environment. The insertion of constructive blue and red threat entities narrows the current training gap by allowing the creation of high-fidelity scenarios that are aligned with F-35 initial qualification and frontline squadron combat training objectives. Additionally, constructive threat entities can be adjusted to reflect current tactics and allow the commander to modify his training to have the confidence that his squadron is truly combat ready. LVC is an F-35 combat training requirement, not an enhancement. With the right balance of live, virtual, and constructive players, this training continuum will enable F-35 pilots to train as they fight, to be combat ready and prepared for a near-peer, highly contested A2AD environment. Cubic is working with the combat air forces and our industry partners to support this F-35 requirement to develop and deliver the future LVC training environment.